Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our May Employer Advisory Committee meeting. We still have some people filtering in, but it seems to have slowed down a little bit. So let me, before I get too much further, go ahead and introduce my co-host for today, Megan Wallach, and let her say a few words about herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Megan Wallach. I'm one of the managers in Employer Services. I was previously the legislative specialist and training manager, so I've worked with some of you a while ago, but I'm typically behind the scenes nowadays, supporting our training team, quality management team, and innovation and efficiency teams. And so I'm excited to be here with Kim today, filling in for Kathleen.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, so this is a packed agenda today, so we're gonna let's actually go back one slide first. So real quick, this is a Zoom webinar. So for those of you who are new to this format, we do not have a chat enabled. If you have a question, we're going to ask you to use the raise your hand feature on the bottom of your screen and then wait for one of us to call on you, and then you will be allowed to unmute your microphone at that time. If you are uncomfortable or unable to do that, ask questions in that way, we do have our advisory committee at calstrs.com email box available to you. You can send your question there, and then they will forward it to Megan and myself as presenters, and we'll be able to read your question live in front of the group. I would ask that unless the presenter says otherwise, because of the how full our agenda is, please hold your questions to the end of each presenter section, and then we will open it up for questions then. Also, just to put it out there, because it has happened in the past, if you are a CalSTRS member and you are on this call, this is not the place for you. This is an employer-focused meeting, and nothing that we say in this meeting will help with what answers you might be looking for. So I will direct you to our contact center or through our online messaging through your MyCalSTRS account. Okay, let's go ahead and go on to the next slide, and Megan will talk about our agenda for today.
Yeah, so we have a really packed agenda today, so we want to jump right into it. We're going to introduce you to our new Employer Services Director. We're going to talk about ACH updates for 2025. We have our typical legislative and regulatory update. We're also going to do a presentation on the life cycle of employer audits. And then we have a slew of pension solution updates. So employer training materials, our typical employer readiness update with some dates and important information, go live updates pertinent to our accounting and financial services areas, a general project update from our pension solution director, and then our open forum that we typically have at the end of the meeting.
Awesome. Okay, so if you have any questions, this is the way to handle it. There was on the prior slide a QR code. If you go back, there we go. That will take you to where the materials are, or the page on our website where you got the information to register for today's webinar is also where you would find the materials. That's where that QR code will take you. All right, so moving on. Megan, if you want to.
Yeah, so as many of you know, our previous director, Jeff Zimmer, is now our Chief Benefits Officer. And so we've completed our recruitment for our new Employer Services Director. And we have Jennifer Spangler here today, who's our new director, to introduce herself.
Thanks, Megan. My name is Jennifer Spangler. Just a couple minutes. I know we have a packed agenda, but wanted to just give you a little bit of my history and why I'm here. I've spent 21 years at CalSTRS, so my first 10 years were spent in the business, customer service, disability and survivor benefits, service retirement, and then I've spent the last 10 years working on our pension solution project, which you are all very familiar with, and we'll hear more about in just a few minutes. So I've partnered very closely most recently with Anthony to make sure that the wheels are turning on the project. And I'm excited to be in employer services and to help you all through to the finish line and even after that with our new legislation that you'll hear about, but AB 1997. So familiar with that and excited to help you all through that and work with the team. We have a really strong team, so just excited to jump in and help you all get moving. Thanks.
Thanks, Jennifer. All right. We're going to bring up Daniel and Jennifer from Financial Services, and they're going to give you some updates on ACH with CalSTRS.
Thank you, Kimberly. And good afternoon, everybody. Hope you can hear me okay. My name is Daniel Garzone. I'm one of the managers here within the Financial Services branch. And with me in the room, but you can't see her at the moment, is Jennifer Ellis, one of the staff members from my team. And we're going to be talking today a little bit about some updates for ACH payments. So we can move over to the next slide. So just three main items that we want to talk about for the agenda here. One of them is a reminder on folks that are on ACH credit to please send their credit addenda record. The second item we have here is ACH debit. So these are employers that use our PayCal website. And so there are a couple enhancements that I'll go more in depth into, but one of them involving self-enrollment, and the other one is a security update, which we labeled as Manual Application System Test, or MAS for short. And the third bullet point here is some additional reminders, some of them pertaining to Pension Solution, and just some minor updates, minor reminders for the whole community. So, next slide, please. So just a reminder on ACH credit employers to please send your addenda record. So if you have any questions on how to submit it correctly, always feel free to reach out to us at our epayments@calstrs.com inbox. But what you see here is an exhibit or a screenshot from our document that talks about the file specification. So it just helps us to ensure that your payment gets apportioned and allocated correctly, and also makes our staff here that processes your payment more efficient in getting that accounted to your account. Next slide, please. And for those users that are using our what we call PayCal website, so this is the folks that are using ACH debit, there's a couple enhancements that rolled out. So one of them here is our self-enrollment. So as of late last month, employers that are not using ACH debit and would like to begin to use ACH debit in the future here, you can request to enroll using this new enhancement. So there's actually a button that you can click on within our PayCal payment portal, which is hyperlinked here. And that new button will say new enrollment request. That would initiate a workflow so we can, in our end, verify, validate, and accept your enrollment. But with that said, we would still need you to complete the electronic payment authorization form, because that's a requirement on our end. So we also hyperlink that too on this presentation. But again, if you have any questions specifically for new enrollments, feel free to email us at epayments@calstrs.com. And just a reminder, do not use this function that we added to the PayCal website to enroll or to add a new user to your account if you're already an existing PayCal debit user. But please continue to reach out to us if you have a new user that you want to be added to your account. And again, ePayments inbox is the correct one there. And finally, in August of this year, we're going to be updating our ACH debit payment process guide. So we'll link to that in our next EAC meeting in August, and we'll go over that at that time as well. Next slide, please. Another update that we made, an enhancement to the PayCal website, is really around the security of the site to ensure it meets industry standards. So again, as of late last month, on the 25th of April, we've implemented a couple security enhancements. And the first one is there is now a 4-digit security code, which is known as the authentication token, that gets emailed to new users. And before, this token code did not expire. Now it has a 24-hour window expiration. So once you go through that process to, again, for new users to enroll, and let's say you attempt the enrollment and you fail with 5 attempts by putting in the incorrect security code, after the 5th attempt, you will be locked out. And so you will need to email us at ePayments inbox to reactivate this account. And then once a new, going back one slide, thank you. Once a new user registers in the account, a notification will also be sent to the employer enrollment email address. So this is the main enrollment email address associated with that account. So you'll see an example of that on the lower left of this presentation slide. That's what the email will look like. it would just have, again, confirming that such end user was successful in their registration. And the last bullet point here, once an existing user account is disabled, then a notification will also be sent to the user's email address. So this is an example here on the bottom right of the presentation deck, where you will see that the an example of what that email may look like. Next slide, please. And finally, for my last slide here, some additional reminders, again, pertaining to pension solution, which again, the panel here will dive a little bit deeper into later on. Please continue to remit your cash as normal during those cutover time periods, which begin again in September of this year. It should be status quo, business as usual to your normal process for remitting cash to us. There will be some changes to the employer paid benefit overpayment, so currently known as EPBO payments. And we'll demonstrate that in the August EAC meeting. We'll have an actual live demonstration or present you with some screenshots of what that new enhancement will be to this particular payment option. And finally, some other updates here for you to be aware of today. We're beginning to do that e-payment waiver request form update. So that's an annual process that we do to reach out to those employers that are currently on waivers to facilitate you all on ACH. So you'll shortly receive emails notifying those employers that are not on ACH to fill out the waivers or again begin the process for ACH enablement. And finally, a general reminder for the whole community here is when submitting an ACH payment, either again through the PayCal website via ACH debit or ACH credit, please remember to include your payment's media ID or invoice number if it's applicable for your payment. It makes our staff lives a little bit easier to, again, allocate and apportion your payment correctly, and also ensures that it gets reflected into your account accordingly. And with that, always feel free to reach out to us at epayments@calstrs.com if you have any questions. And I'll open it now if there's any questions for the ACH payments.
I think you're good, Daniel.
All right, thank you.
All right, so next we have Joycelyn with our legislative and regulatory update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Glad to be here as the legislature is in full swing with their committee hearings nearing their fiscal committee deadline next week. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll provide an update on legislation that's running through the process this year. Two of these may be new to you, and the other two you've seen before. AB 65 is the pregnancy leave for educators, an additional 14 weeks of pregnancy leave, which our board took a support position on. This bill was up in Assembly Appropriations today and moved to the suspense file. And then SB 853 at the bottom of the list, that's our housekeeping bill. So it has moved smoothly through the Senate and is already to the Assembly. It's been moving through on consent. So again, minor provisions that we've gone over before that are non-controversial and straightforward. So the other two bills that have been added, for your awareness, we are monitoring those. We do not have positions on them at this point in time. Start with AB 1383. So this bill is making changes to the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. It is being sponsored by the firefighters, so there are some provisions that deal with safety members, so they don't apply to CalSTRS. One of the provisions is increasing the cap for members subject to PEPRA, so 2% at 62 members. And then there is also a provision that allows for employers and employees to bargain for employers to cover a portion of employee contributions. So to pay for them, not to change the contribution amounts, the percentages that are, or rates that are due, but just to have employers pay for that as an extra amount of money that employees can keep in their paychecks. So that bill, again, we're watching that it's early in the process as it's moving through. The cap would have implications for the contribution rate for our members if we remain included. So we would see a 0.5% increase in the members' contribution rate. That's 2% at 62 members. And it's for, again, increasing the cap from about $182,000 currently for those members here to $280,000. So again, there would be more compensation that would be creditable to CalSTRS. So contributions would be due on that to us for everyone who pays contributions. So just make you aware of that as we keep an eye on it moving forward in the process. And then AB 1439 is now a 2-year bill. So again, we don't have a position on this one, but it is about placing restrictions on, so no new or additional investments in California development projects that don't have certain labor standards protections. And so this one, again, not moving forward at this point in time. So we're just keeping an eye on that one as well. So any questions on current legislation that's out there? I'm not seeing any hands raised, but if any occur to you, there'll be other chances to ask during my presentation. So next slide, please. And this is where we kind of look back to the past and wanted to let you know, it got mentioned briefly, AB 1997, our credible compensation simplification bill. The statutes allow for flexibility in the effective date, and so the board determines that. So I wanted to let you know at their March board meeting, the board did adopt July 1, 2027 as the effective date for the provisions of AB 1997. The next slide, please. And then similarly for SB 327, it had flexibility in the statute. And at the March meeting, the board adopted a January 1st, 2026 effective date for the provisions that restrict backdating of service retirement applications or benefit effective dates to 9 months prior to when the application is submitted. So that's going to go into effect in less than a year here. It's of course more on the benefit side rather than the active member side, but wanted to let you know about that. And then SB 765 again in place for the next fiscal year. So for 2025-26, the post-retirement annual earnings limit is $80,245 with the provisions that are in place due to SB 765. So next slide, please. I think we'll move on to the regulations. So any questions on legislation that's getting implemented coming up in the future? Okay, not seeing any hands. Next slide, please. So we've been quite busy on the regulations front. So there were 2 items presented in March to get the board's approval to initiate the formal rulemaking process. And that is the administrative remedy regulations related to AB 1667 and the credible compensation simplification regulations related to AB 1997. So what the board did was say we can start that formal process. We're looking at doing that in mid-July. So we would publish a notice of rulemaking, proposed rulemaking, and then it would trigger what could be a 45-day public comment period, written public comment period. It will end up being longer than 45 days by a little bit because it will be backstopped by a hearing that will be held at the September board meeting. And so there will be opportunities to provide verbal comments at the September board meeting and to submit written comments there as well. But we're looking at those being noticed in July. And then I'm going to skip to the bottom real quick. At the May board meeting, we asked the board for approval to start the formal rulemaking process on updates to our format for employer reports regulations. And so we do have sections of our regulations that incorporate by reference the layouts that will be used in Benefit Connect and the colloquially referred to as the new file format. So this is not what you'll be using when you go live with Pension Solution, which you'll of course learn more about later today. But this is for what goes into effect after that point in time. And we're aligning this, part of what this rulemaking will do is aligning this with the implementation of AB 1997. So again, there will be establishing an effective date of July 1, 2027 for these regulations. We'll be updating the date that the file layout is included by for reference purposes in those regs. And then we're making some changes to the layout itself to make sure that we line it up with the different provisions of AB 1997. So you can take a look at the May board item if you want to look at the specific language there. Again, and then the language in the Code of Regulations previously allowed for waiver periods when we were anticipating having the new file format go into effect without any major legislative changes, but that's being removed since we do have to be in compliance with AB 1997 by July 1, 2027. So again, the board also in this instance is planning for us to have a hearing on that in September. So we're planning to notice it in mid-July with the others. And our plan too is to combine it with the other AB 1997 regulations so that we have one package to move through as a whole and especially more smoothly with the Office of Administrative Law. So keep an eye out for those notices when they occur and your opportunities to provide feedback. And then last but not least, on the board election side, so this has to do with the logistics we have for our 3 elected board seats. And we have draft language that we've shared with various stakeholders that will be presented to the board for a first reading in September. That's our plan, at least, barring any shifts in that. So I want to make you aware of that as well. So any questions on those? Great. Appreciate the time.
Looks like
Thank you.
you're in the clear, Joycelyn. Okay, so next up on our agenda, bringing up Chris from Audit Services to talk about the life cycle of employer audits.
All right. Well, hi, my name is Chris Wall, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Employer Audits team here at CalSTRS. And I'm going to talk about the life cycle of the employer audits, which I'll just kind of cover from the beginning to the end when we issue the reports and complete audit follow-up. Next slide. The first part is I'll kind of go over what we'll be discussing. I'll start out by talking about why do we audit employers. I'll go over the risk assessment, the audit process itself, which will be where most of the employers fall in, and then the follow-up process. Next slide. To start out, I'll go over a little bit of why do we audit employers. Audits are authorized per Education Code Section 2206, Subdivision A, which states, as often as the board determines necessary, it may audit or cause to be audited the records of any public agency. That's what gives us the authority to perform the audits. But really, why do we do it and what value does it add? It supports CalSTRS' mission to secure the financial future of California educators. Audits provide assurance that the employer reporting to CalSTRS is accurate and complete, and they ensure the correct benefits are paid to members. Next slide. And so from here, I'll go a little bit through the risk assessment process itself. And the risk assessment is a process the employer audits team goes through to identify and rank potential risks, and the data is used to develop the audit plan. The process assists the employer audit team selecting employers to audit based on the level of risk and also identify how many auditable areas will be reviewed on the annual audit plan. Finally, when different situations do arise, we reserve the right to make changes as needed. The audit plan itself, it really comprises of the risk assessment process, which we'll talk about. It leads into the audit plan development, and then we'll update it. Next slide. So I'll kind of start out here by talking a little bit about the compliance risks. The compliance risks, this includes the evaluation of the audit universe, which I will go over on the next slide to identify all areas we could potentially audit. We also gather stakeholder input. This is our internal and external stakeholders to see if they have any concerns. And finally, we use data analytics to evaluate all of the information that has been self-reported by the employers. We rank it based on the impact and likelihood that errors could occur. And that's really what leads us to come up with the audit plan of employers that may be higher risk and potentially audited, and also areas that could be high risk and included in our audit plan. Next slide. This kind of leads us to the audit universe itself. The audit universe really consists of special pay. Is one area we look at. We look at base compensation, which we're going to be changing to the term salary for all draft reports issued after July 1st, 2025. We could look at unused sick leave, post-retirement earnings, and membership. Those areas really all consist of what make up the audit universe when we're auditing employers. Next slide. And that kind of leads me into what the audit process. This is really what you as employers would experience if we were doing the audit. This is a section that would apply to you. And really it's broken down into 4 areas. There's the preliminary section, the review section, the results, and finally audit follow-up, which I'll go into on the next few slides. Next slide. A little bit about the preliminary process. The preliminary process all starts with the initial call to the employer, where one of the auditors will reach out to the employer, find out who we're going to be working with during the audit, give a kind of a description of what the scope and objectives of the audit would be, and also give just a general idea of what information might be requested, whether the audit will be on-site or remote, and just give you an overall idea of what to expect if you were to be audited. Once the initial call is complete, that leads us to the engagement letter, where that's really a recap of everything that goes into everything that was already discussed in the initial call, and makes it more formal, and this formally kicks off the audit process. Part of this will also include an information request where we'll get information from you, the employers, to start the audit process to get an idea of what to expect. We also reach out to our internal departments, such as the audit resolution team, to get information from them that we may be able to use in our audits. And we review all of that information, review all available data, and from there we'll come up with a sample selection of who's going to be included in our audit, and that'll kick off the actual audit itself. Next slide. This takes us to the review process, and this is where a few things will happen. First, we'll kind of determine the location. Will the audits be done remotely, meaning their fieldwork is all done here at CalSTRS, or will they be on site? More of our audits are moving towards an on-site actual location. Just now that we're getting further and further away from COVID, that's really the route we're going, is back to more of the traditional audits, but we're kind of doing it in steps. Then there's the obtain, test, and conclude portion. This is where we'll get all of the personnel and payroll data from the employer. We'll test and analyze all of the information that's been provided to determine what potential observations or issues may arise. And then we'll develop our findings. And from there, and throughout the process, there's really an overall communication that we keep with the employers. We will make sure that employers are always comprised of the status of the audit, of how it's going, any potential issues that may arise. We'll always make sure that we'll request any clarification to make sure we fully understand the issues. And then finally, there is some education as we work with you and kind of help you out and determining or work with you to figure out the audit process and any potential findings. Next slide. And this really takes us to the draft, the results process. And this is where once the audit is completed and we've gone through all of our audit findings and started working on our draft report, the first step in this results part is we'll issue a draft report. In the draft report, it will ask the employers and exclusive representatives to respond to the draft report within 60 days as to whether they agree or disagree with the finding. Once we get those responses back from the employers or exclusive representatives, we'll completely evaluate the responses, and if they agree with them, we'll go ahead and move on to the final report. If they disagree with anything in the report, we'll evaluate it, and there will be a resolution in the final report, or I should say an analysis in the final report as to whether it changed anything throughout the process. And then finally, once we're done with the employer response, we'll move on to issuing the final report. The final report does have a few things that it requests in it as it concludes the audit process. It will ask the employers to provide a list of all affected members within 60 days of the audit to our audits resolution team, and it will start the process for the 90 days to appeal the audit findings. All of those requirements are laid out in the final report. Next slide. And once that's completed, that really takes us to the follow-up process for the audit. The first part of it is once the report has gone out final, CalSTRS program area audits resolution team will reach out to the employers to begin resolving the audit findings. Once they've successfully resolved the findings for the audit, they'll notify our employer audits team that the findings are completed, and we'll start our validation process. From there, we'll go through the audits, make sure that they are validated and are now in compliance with the teacher's retirement law. And if they are, it closes out our findings. If we determine that anything is not validated, we'll reach back out to the program area. This is probably not a very common occurrence. For the most part, we're usually in agreement, but when that does occur, we will reach out to them. They'll work with the employer to resolve any areas that may not be validated, and then they'll send it back to us to revalidate everything. Once all of the findings for an employer have been closed, or actually throughout the year, whether they're closed or not, we do report the results of the audit follow-up process to the ARM committee when we do our annual risk assessment or our annual results, which will tell the ARM committee what findings have been resolved and whether there are any in progress or outstanding findings. And that process really concludes the audit process and it'll go over the audit process from beginning to end. Does anyone have any questions about the audit process?
No, I don't see any hands, Chris. I do want to
Alright.
add though, from the audits resolution team here in Employer Services, we also add a 6-month follow-up from from the ending of your validation. So 6 months after the audit closes, our team will do a 6-month follow-up to ensure that everything is still going as planned. So that is kind of our final closing of the loop there. All right, so then I believe, Megan, if you want to introduce our next presenter.
Yeah, so next we have Mia Tanoya Hill, who's going to share with you some information about the availability of employer training materials for Pension Solution.
Thank you, Megan and Kim. I am so excited to talk to you all this afternoon about our Pension Solution employer training materials. If you've been with CalSTRS through this project for some time now, this may be very familiar to you, but if you are new to the new system, and new to this project, there may be some helpful information for you today. Well, next slide, please. So the first place I want to get us started is getting started with NewSo. There are 2 main locations where you'll find all of our training materials and content related to the new system. That's going to be our employer support portal. So we have that address here, employersupport.calstrs.com, or our employer learning center. That's going to be training.calstrs.com. So our employer learning center is going to have links to things that are on the employer support portal, but our employer support portal won't have all of the materials that are on the employer learning center. If you've never registered for the employer learning center before, it is a completely free account, unassociated with any other CalSTRS account, and we highly recommend your registration. This just gives you access to the breadth of materials we have, not just on the new system, but also on our teachers' retirement law. Focusing now, so on our employer support portal, there are 2 job aids that I highly recommend. One is going to be our employer contacts job aid. So this describes tasks that each contact type can complete, and how to add new contacts. If you are not the type of contact who would be adding anything, I still like looking at this job aid to verify what tasks you'll be able to complete in the new system. That might give you a good idea on materials that you'll want to check out related to those tasks, or if you're seeing something that, oh, I should be able to do this in the new system, and I don't see that I have that capability, can help facilitate conversations with your administrator on getting that appropriate role and access. And then we have our using the secure employer website job aid. So this is going to be our more generic login, registration, and then how to navigate that site. On our Employer Learning Center, like I've mentioned, we have an introduction to the new Secure Employer Website course. So this course is going to include the computer-based training, job aids, and all of those related materials. But this goes over a little bit more than our job aid would, and includes system demonstrations on things like navigation, using our electronic content management, that's how you'll upload documents, accessing employee, employment, and membership account information. Next slide, please. The next type of material that I'll recommend here, I call guiding materials. So these aren't the materials that go over my click here, do this, do that. This points us to where we want to see those tasks, or if I want to know more about how to do something, I can go find that for myself. So we do have on the Employer Support Portal the Success Criteria and Testing Guide for the report sources here who've been working very closely with the Employer Readiness team on these tasks. That is probably no surprise to you. That is a great guide for what tasks we imagine will be successful for you in the new system. Then we have our SO responsibilities for report units. So if you are a report unit and not a report source, there are specific things that you may be doing in the new system. And this outlines those tasks. They're going to be related likely to our employment and enrollment tasks. And then we have our employer related forms crosswalk. So with our new system, there are forms that will be retiring and be replaced by online transaction. There are forms that are continuing on, that they are not impacted by the new system. And this crosswalk outlines each of those employer related forms, but only for those that CalSTRS issues. So if CalSTRS does not issue the form, it will not be included on that crosswalk. And then on our Employer Learning Center, we do have the success criteria checklist course. So if you want to pair together, so you're looking at your criteria and testing guide, and you want to pair together that training content, we do have that course available. And then our Employer Reporting Responsibility series. This I think is great if you are new to your report unit or you are a new report unit. This gives you just a high level of the employer reporting responsibilities in general to CalSTRS, and then points us to those available materials specific to the new system as well. Next slide. So looking at those more broad recommendations, there are also recommendations that we can make for specific tasks. If you have questions on what content may be best suited for you in your circumstance, you can always reach out to employer training at calstrs.com, and we're happy to provide that training assessment. But some of the topics that I'll mention here today are maybe more common or more frequently used. So we have maintaining employer organization information. So when we look at an employer organization, we're thinking of our employer profile details. So not about a person that you're reporting, but the organization itself. We're going to recommend that employer contacts job aid and our employer contacts type CBT. And then there's also a managing employer organization information CBT. Related, if you are a cash balance employer, there are specific cash balance employer organization maintenance tasks that do not apply to defined benefit only employers. So if you are a cash balance employer, you may also find the cash balance contribution rate job aid, the cash balance report schedules job aid, and the cash balance employer organization tasks CBT helpful. We'll do the next slide. So next up with our recommendations, and I'll mention here that these are not comprehensive lists. You could go into our Employer Learning Center and take everything about the new system, and we certainly would recommend it. These are, if you have maybe 30 minutes to an hour, what content would I like to focus on? These are those recommendations. So we have our maintaining person or employment information. So we do have a person maintenance job aid, submitting an online enrollment transaction job aid. There is the MR87 file specification, so looking at that file specification as a whole. The MR87 enrollment file upload CBT, managing MR87 and employment data CBT, and the online employment transaction CBT. So some of the materials we reference may not take as long as our computer-based trainings, again, are going to have those demonstrations, but you can speed through things if there are particular sections that you're looking to focus on. Then we have reporting unused sick leave information. So we do have an unused sick leave webinar this Friday that you can register for through the Employer Learning Center on our calendar. If you have questions about doing that, please feel free to contact employer training at calstrs.com. But related specifically to the new system, so that webinar is about the law. Specifically related to the new system, we have our submitting termination and sick leave data job aid, the processing pending work items job aid. So if you're not familiar, a pending work item is related to submitting that sick leave data. And then we have a submitting termination and unused sick leave data CBT. We'll do our next slide. And to wrap up, we have reporting contribution information. So this is a big one for a lot of folks thinking about reporting that information about the members' contributions. Now, this isn't going to be creditable compensation. So if you have joined us for those TRL courses, we still invite you to join us for that material. This is, again, focused on that system functionality, but there is a contribution reporting terminology job aid, how to submit an online F496 and transaction job aid, uploading a contribution file job aid, our F496 file specification, the VDF file specification. Now that's going to be cash balance only. And then we have our contribution reporting course. This is probably the longest. There are the most materials about, as we anticipate this is the bulk of what folks will be using that new system for. And then we have completing employer reporting requests. So if you are not familiar with this functionality, highly recommend checking out at the very least the job aid. But we have a job aid and a computer-based training, a CBT, about those employer reporting requests and how to complete them. All right. And that takes us through our content for today. We'll take the last slide here if there are any questions.
I saw a hand go up and then come right back down, Mia.
Right. Well,
Um,
if you think of that question later, we're happy to have you at employertraining@calstrs.com.
maybe they'll have questions for you during open forum. So that brings us to our next presentation. This will be from our employer readiness focus, and that will bring up Dan from our employer readiness team.
Thank you, Kim. You can go to the next slide, please. So hey, I'm Dan Demalier. I'm the employer readiness team lead. And here's just a quick overview of some things that I'll be going over. Some of this is going to be a little bit repetitive of what you've already heard, but we still want to talk about it a little bit from the employer readiness perspective. That includes the cutover timeline and key dates, the database refresh schedule, success criteria status, the login process for SO at Go Live, the SO scheduled downtime prior to Go Live, and then some training and development updates, similarly that you just heard from Mia. So next slide, please. All right, so here's the project schedule from a cutover timeline perspective. So if you see here we're currently in the testing and final file validation period to get the success criteria in complete through July. I'm going to say this a couple of times, but right now we have the most recent data in from our May refresh, which is March data. And right now we have about 45 days left until July, where this data is still going to be good. And then it'll be refreshed another month after that. So right now we're in that period where it's the most amount of time that you have to test. So we highly encourage that and reach out to the team if you need any assistance with that. In August, we have the user conversion validation. So sometime around mid-August, around the 10th, employers are going to be given a contact list of current SO permissions. And we want everyone to go over that for about 2 weeks and get it back to us. And then we're going to map those permissions to the new roles in the new system. So once that time period has closed, we won't be able to make any changes to that until after Go Live. So we strongly suggest going through that finally in that 2-week period. And once we get it back, we'll take care of the transition so that those roles are mapped at Go Live. And then the next important date here is August 27th. So that's the deadline to submit any buybacks, account receivables, the Fox Pro stuff there. And that's closing at 5 p.m. on that date. And that includes the money that's associated with that as well. So just want to point that out. It's not just the file, it's the money. And after that, we're going to be doing some internal analysis on that. It does take some time. It's pretty labor intensive, which is why we have that date in August. And then it's also prior to the month that would begin in September, which is when a lot of this comes in as well. So we want to give our internal staff enough time to process all this before cutover as well. Then cutover is going to begin September 5th at 5 p.m. And that is when current day SO, will be in inquiry only mode. So that will still be the same website, same URL for everybody to log into and inquire and get some information, but you won't be able to actually perform any tasks in there. And then tentatively right now, September 25th is when new SO goes live, and you'll be able to go right to the same website and log in. I'll explain some more of the login process a little bit later. And then a few days later, the contribution account portal will go live as well once it's all connected to new SO. So it'll be about 4 days where you will not have access to contribution account portal. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's the database refresh schedule. As I mentioned, we had most recent May refresh. That gives you data as of 3/14. So right now is the best time for success criteria before the July refresh. At that time, it's going to be refreshed to May data. So any of that previous data that you were working on will get wiped. So we encourage you doing this right now, especially it's about 45 days. Otherwise, you'll have to start over. But again, please reach out to us if you need help, and we're getting close to that timeline. We can help try to get you across that finish line for the success criteria. And then after that will be August 3rd, and that will be June data, and that brings us right into the cutover timeline. Next slide, please. Oh, and I did want to mention actually that the ERE, the employer readiness environment, will live on after Go Live for other testing, and we'll have about a monthly refresh period as well. So here we have the success criteria status. These numbers are a little older, about a week old. So actually since then, a lot more employers have completed success criteria, but at the time we had 10 employers that have completed all the success criteria, which is really great. We had 24, we have more now, employers that are actively testing and working toward the completion of success criteria 2 and 3, which is the production level files. And then we have 3 of the 51 that we've identified that do submit account receivable transactions that have completed that as well. And again, here are those dates for the success criteria. But yeah, everything's been great. We have a big uptick. We're hoping to get a little bit more, especially after this meeting. And as always, employer readiness team is here to walk you through the success criteria and check you off the list. You can go to the next slide, please. All right, so the login process at Go Live. So as I mentioned about mapping those user permissions in August, at Go Live, everybody is going to be registered, but they'll have to re-enroll. And what that's going to look like is a one-time password is going to be sent to the email addresses associated with those profiles, and it's going to be valid for 24 hours. So if you don't get that email or you don't see that email, you will be able to reach out to Employer Help, which is a recent transition that we just did as well for the login process. So you reach out to your Employer Help representative as you would in today's SO, and they'll be able to actually get you that one-time password so you can use that. They have the ability to view that. So you can use that within that 24-hour period. Otherwise, once it lapses those 24 hours, you'll have to re-register like a new user and go through the administration process again. And then one thing I did want to touch on, it's something that may have been mentioned in the past, but multi-factor authentication is something that will be implemented post Go Live. We weren't sure if it was going to be at Go Live or after Go Live, but it will be after Go Live. We don't really have a time frame, so more information to come on that. But that's going to be something that's similar to how you log into your bank or anything online where you get that that one-time password, that authentication that goes to your email address. And that's something that we're working on, seeing what that implementation looks like. It will exist at some point to get into SO. It does already exist from a CalPERS perspective as well. So we're in alignment with that, but we want to make sure that we're making it as easy as possible for our employers as well. And we're looking at other provisions to make sure that you have an option like to remember this computer so you don't always have to do that. But more to come on that, and we'll get you that information as soon as we have more. Next slide. Thank you. So here are some downtime dates of current production. So we have a couple of internal runs. I just outlined them here for transparency. So we have some complex issue runs, which is what the CI stands for, and that's for membership lifecycle things. And that's going to be happening on July 20th and July 27th. So those are both Sundays. So a production SO will be down during that time. We just want to make sure employers are aware of that in case you're working on extra things to get them in prior to our cutover period on the weekend. Those 2 Sundays, it will not be available while we do some internal fixes on that information. Similarly with our archive flag runs. So these are a lot of older accounts that are still existent in our present day system that we're going to archive and not cut over once we deem that those are not necessary and active accounts. That's happening on August 10th. And then annual update, which is our annual process for the DB/DBS transfer and the printing of the RPRs. That's going to happen on the 23rd and 24th of August. So that will also be down, and SO will be unavailable to employers at that time. But I wanted to just point out those dates to ensure full transparency for everybody in case they're working on the weekend trying to get information into us. Next slide, please. And training and development updates. So you got most of this from Mia already, but again, in the Learning Center, we have the CBTs on there. On the employer support portal, we have job aids. And then the submittal process for several of those existing forms, which are touched on as well, is changing. We have that forms crosswalk that's super helpful to see what you do today versus what you will do in the future. That includes reduced workload, express benefit report information. And then, of course, employersupport.calstars.com is the URL to get on there and get all this great information. Next slide, please. And that's it from employer readiness. I'd like to open it up for any question.
Looks like we have Deborah. Go ahead and unmute your microphone, Deborah.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm sorry. I just wanted to check. I'm not involved in too much in the testing, but I'm trying to coordinate with the Express Benefits form being paper currently and being converting over to electronic. Is it that I assume that is not happening prior to any of these conversions, right? So our people who are retiring and leaving in June, we're good on paper for now?
Yeah, for now, correct. Yeah, once we go through the actual cutover and implement NewSo, then it will be transactions that will be done on screen.
Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to make sure so
Yeah,
we don't stall out anybody. Thank
for
you for
sure.
your time.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah.
Any more questions for Dan and employer readiness? I know a lot of you have probably heard his voice quite a bit if you've been in our webinars recently for Pension Solution. But if you have any questions that you haven't gotten to ask, now is the time. Anna, if we could get you to unmute your microphone, please.
Hi. Yes, so question on slide 6. You were saying that everybody has to re-enroll and the temporary password will be active for 1 day. Is the employer help team the only ones who can reset the password if they don't do this during that 24-hour period? Or can the county office administrators do that?
Yeah, the administrator can do that from the county, but as a fail-safe, employer help does have access to see that one-time password as well. So we would definitely encourage you to do things as you would normally in the future, moving forward by going through the county admin. But if you do need that extra support, employer help is here to do so.
Okay, one more thing. Regarding, that 24, when you will be emailing that temporary password, would it be possible to let us know when that's going to happen so we can give advance notice to all our users to
sure.
be watching out for our email?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we will. We don't have an exact time frame, and because it's 24 hours, whether if it's at 8 a.m. or 8 p.m., it makes a big difference, right? So once we get the exact time from when that's going to happen, we will communicate that out to all of you for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more hands raised, Dan. I think you're in the clear at least until open forum, so don't go anywhere.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so next, we are going to be bringing up 3 of our staff members from our financial services branch to talk to you about interacting with them during Pension Solution Go Live. So over to you guys.
Thank you, Kim. My name is Freddy Villarreal. I'm with the Financial Services Branch, and we are going to present employer updates for Pension Solution Go Live. Now, we're going to be talking about employer accounts receivable management, online verification for employer approved leave replace. This is going to be replacing the SC 1553 form, and finally, penalties and interest. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's begin with employer accounts receivable management. Next slide. Thank you. Now, we're excited to announce that several upcoming updates to our accounts receivable management system. These changes are designed to create a more unified and consistent experience across all employer accounts receivable processes. The key changes are related to accounts receivable due to employer responsibility and employer accounts receivable related to excess sick leave, retirement incentive, and 1-year final compensation. Now, let's begin with accounts receivables due to employer responsibility. These are the ones identified on the 2022 AB 1667. Now, what's changing? All employer invoices will be posted in the CUP portal. All invoices will be designed to match the look and feel of our newer invoice formats. No information should be lost. The goal is to keep the existing data fields. This will give you a consistent visual identity across all invoicing. Now, it should also reduce confusion when managing multiple invoice types. And also, we will streamline all processes for your accounting teams. In addition, these accounts receivables due to employer responsibility are currently named employer paid benefit overpayment. We are renaming this type to employer error recovery. This is a purely name change. All documentation, portal references like PayCal and communications will reflect this new naming. The purpose is to give a better alignment in terminology with the teacher's retirement law. Now, the other employer accounts receivable years related to excess sick leave, retirement incentive, and 1-year final compensations, this will be enhanced and will be relating the information to all districts as well. All processes will be updated to maintain a consistency with all other employer receivables. The purpose is to simplify the workflow and mirror all employer AR processes. Well, in that way, there is a consistency experience regardless of the employer AR that you are managing, and for more intuitive process flow as well. Again, the goal is to give a consistent experience regardless of which employer AR type you're managing. So we are trying to align all the employee receivables with the same process. And that will be, that's still a working process. We're still in our testing period. More updates will be given to you and to all the districts in a future time. For now, that will be my presentation. I'll give it now to my coworker, Nikki Keller. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nikki Keller. I'm a supervisor with the Service Credit Purchases Unit. Oh, next slide, please. Yes, I'm going to be talking about a transition of one of our forms to online verification once we go live. Can I have the next slide, please? So I wanted to talk about the form SC 1553, verification for employer-approved leaves. That's going to be, when we go live, it's going to transition to online verification. There's 2 ways that can be done. It can be done sort of proactively. You can go in and through the secure employer website and put that information in, or reactively, the member requests to purchase that leave time, and the system will send a request for verification, again, through the secure employer website. I attached the related job aids. One's, again, the proactive approach, one's the reactive approach for your reference. And that will go into effect, like I said, when we go live. Thank you. Are there any other, oh, I should ask, are there any questions? Okay, that's all I had. I'm going to pass it on to Cassie.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, Cassandra Mallet-Beck, but most of you know me as Cassie. Thank you for having us today. I'm here to talk to you about penalties and interest, the plan for our cutover timeline that Dan went over, as well as for a period of time after we go live. Next slide, please. So the intention of this plan is to ensure that employers are not harmed by CalSTRS implementing this system. So we did some analysis and took a look at our penalties and wanted to see which ones we thought would be impacted by this. So the plan we have is for penalty type 1, CalSTRS would waive penalties for the July and August 2025 pay periods. Just a reminder of penalty type 1, that's our late report penalty. So that penalty triggers when we receive new information for a service period that we have not received information before from, and it looks at the report unit level. So for this penalty type, we will be looking at the actual payroll lines for those service periods to waive that penalty. And then penalty type 2, our late adjustment penalty, which triggers if adjustments are made after 60 days from the date of a notification. We will be waiving those penalties for the July and August files. So the nature of those penalties are slightly different. So when we look for the penalty type 2, we will be looking for the July and August files. There's a caveat to this waiver. So the caveat is we have to receive these files within 45 calendar days from the date of the go live with Benefit Connect. So I believe on Dan's slide, that was right now tentatively scheduled for late September 25th. So in order to qualify for these waivers, CalSTRS needs to receive those files within 45 calendar days. For penalty type 3 and penalty type 4, we do not expect these penalties to be impacted by the system implementation. So currently we are not offering waivers for these penalties. As we implement this, if we see that there is some sort of impact, we will take a look at that and waive applicable penalties. But as Daniel mentioned earlier on, please make sure you're remitting your contributions timely. There is not any impact to the way you can remit contributions. So if you are not remitting your contributions timely, your penalty would be valid. So it's really important to ensure you are paying timely during this time frame. Next slide, please. So this slide is to give transparency and kind of expectations on what to expect for this process. So we're not turning off our penalty and interest system. So when these files come in, you will see penalties calculate and you will see an invoicing cap. What we plan to do is CalSTRS will open disputes on behalf of employers once the files are received, and we will manage the waiver of the penalties through our dispute process. So I just want to put that out there so you know kind of what to expect with this process. Again, we will be opening up those disputes on behalf of the employers. And as always, if you have any questions, you can contact us at contributions@calstrs.com. And that's all I have. So if anyone has any questions for the three of us, we are available.
Looks like we have Claudia. Claudia, if you could go ahead and unmute your microphone so you can ask your question.
Hi, thank you. I had two quick questions. One, if you could just kind of repeat the portal that all the invoices will be in. I kind of didn't hear that part. And then I did have a question about the disputes that are going to be opened up on our behalf. Will we be receiving some kind of notification from CalSTRS that a dispute was opened on our behalf as like the report source, for example?
Yeah. So I think one question might be for Freddie, and so
Yes.
let me answer the last question, and then since my mic is on. So that's a good question. We can consider doing that. Let me take that back. I hear what you're saying. I think that would be great to have that notification. So I'm going to jot that down as a note, and we'll figure out the best way to notify the employers of that. I think that's a fair request.
Thank you, Cassie. And for the first part, counties are already receiving invoices through CAP portal for our system error recovery employer portion. So it will be similar to that process, all for all our employer receivables. So we try to mimic that and penalties and interest. So everything is going to be like a one-shop place, everything in one place, just for to facilitate any processes with all our accounts receivables.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Cassie, Freddie, or Nikki? Okay. Stick around, guys, for open forum, just in case anyone thinks of anything. Megan, if you want to introduce our next speaker.
Yeah, so our next speaker is Anthony Sweeney, and he's going to give us a pension solution project update on the project as a whole.
Thanks, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. Anthony Sweeney, Pension Solution Project Director. Happy to be here in front of you to just give you an overall project update. Probably overlap Dan a little on some items, but hoping you get what you need out of this. So going on to the next slide. just a general project update. I'll just give some talking points on where we are. Right, we have our implementation date of September. Right now, the big item on our plate is user acceptance testing. So we're almost through. We have a couple months left of user acceptance testing. We're hitting some rough patches. We're down to the last 20% so of our scripts. There's about 90 scripts left to pass. Usual typical issues that we're coming across with data and just getting the environment ready and getting those test cases going. So we're running into some defects and we're working through design updates to make sure those things work. So that's consuming a lot of our project team's time right now, and energy. Data conversion's another big one. Financial reconciliation we're working on. But overall, I think looking at our project health, we have about 20 different work streams that we measure, and we are on target to still go live in September. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what leads up to go live. So on the next slide, we have an implementation activities calendar. Just wanted to show you this to show that there are various checkpoints between now and go live. You see the 4 readiness scorecards at the top. We've already completed one. Our next one is coming up pretty soon at the beginning of June. This is our checkpoint 2. Those readiness scorecards measure 8 categories of information. They each have dozens of activities in there of where we should be at that point in time and where we are. And that allows us to evaluate if we're ready to move forward to the next big activity. The big activities are in that middle swim lane there. So we already did a cutover dry run 1. I'll show you more of that on the next slide. But we are getting ready to move into cutover dry run 2. Which will be a 24/7 practice process of our cutover from the legacy system to the current system. We will practice a go, no-go decision with our steering committees, our directors, and our executives. And if all that goes well, we'll move forward into what we call our soft launch, which is a production ready system that we're going to play with for about a month and a half or so, inputting live transactions as if we're in production to make sure everything we've tested is working as we've expected. And then we'll do a readiness checkpoint 3, and then ultimately a readiness checkpoint 4. That's done right before we go into real cutover into go live, and we'll have those go no go decisions again, and then we'll go live in September. The next slide shows a real life calendar of what we plan. So Dan covered some of this. We talked about September 5th when we shut down the secure employer website, goes into inquiry mode. You're still able to search information and find what you need, but you won't be able to submit files or input transactions anymore. Come the next week, we'll be shutting down some of our internal and other external systems. The website where members can do self-service transactions won't be available. Our contact center application won't be available to perform transactions, although they can capture customer interactions, look up member accounts, and answer some limited questions for our members. We'll run our last retirement roll out of the legacy system to pay October 1st warrants. And then Friday the 12th, we'll go into inquiry mode for our legacy system. So now staff will not be able to input any transactions into our legacy system. We'll start extracting, converting, and validating the data gets from our legacy system to our new system, Benefit Connect. You can see on September 22nd, we'll deploy Benefit Connect. We'll do some validation. We'll work with our steering committees on go, no go, and then we'll plan on going live on the 25th. The next weekend, we'll integrate with our financial system, Business Direct, which is not contingent on us going live, so we can wait till the following weekend to sync with them. I think one of the important things here is that those dry runs that I mentioned in the previous slide, we did one. It was sort of a day and time, just an 8-hour day exercise, when in reality, it's going to be a 24/7 process. But the first dry run allowed us to test this process out to see how long it really takes. We've recognized a 1 to 2 day savings. So in our dry run 2 that's coming up in June, we'll validate that when we do the real dry run. And if that holds true, we would pull in our Benefit Connect go live date by a day or 2. So that's why we say this is for planning purposes. 25th is an estimated go live date. So it could be the 23rd or 24th. What that does is it gets you up and running sooner. Processing transactions, submitting your files. It gets our members access to the website sooner, and it gives our staff the ability to catch up on those transactions that have built up over that, maybe 7 business day window, 7 to 9 day business day window that we had to stop processing transactions. So that's all good things that are happening, and hope to validate that in the next month or so. One thing I forgot to piggyback on, Dan mentioned multi-factor authentication. We are trying to implement that post go live. We're looking at ways, as he mentioned, to kind of minimize the impacts to you. The main concern here is that the SCW is just a website. You're just accessing a website. So if somebody leaves your agency and you don't take away their access for any reason, they could still access that website and get access to the data. So we're trying to prevent against that. We trust you have an agreement with us to make that happen, but we just want to ensure from our side that that's happening as well. So with that, I think I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I did want to give a shout out. There's many of the school employers who have already been verified, met the checklist. And I know San Diego is one of the bigger agencies, very complex, and have completed their testing. And I know I'm not supposed to use the term certified, but for lack of a better term, you've passed all the testing requirements. So that's huge. I know Solano and San Mateo have been instrumental in finding some issues for us. So some defects that are out there, sooner we catch those through the testing efforts, we appreciate that and allow us to reconcile those and get those fixed and ready for you to retest. So just wanted to give my appreciation to all those folks out there who are helping us test. Oh, so hold on. I misspoke, San Diego. You still have some work to do. You haven't been completely certified. I got that wrong, but you have been one of the larger agencies who is very complex, who's been testing over and over again. So we appreciate that. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Anthony? Thank you so much for being here with us, Anthony.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me.
All right. So that takes us to our open forum. Before Megan and I actually open it up for questions regarding the presentations from today. Over the last couple of years, I think now you've seen, I'm trying to remember when she started co-hosting with me, but Kathleen Arceo, our other assistant director, I wanted to recognize her as this will be her, she's attending, but she's not co-hosting with me today. This is her last EAC before she retires. She's been at CalSTRS for 14 and a half years and spent all of that time with us here in Employer Services. So we're going to miss her quite a bit. So we'll have some various co-hosts here over the next couple of meetings until we get that position filled. And yeah, so again, thanks again so much, Kathleen, for everything you have done for everyone here in Employer Services and all of our employers. So with that, any questions for any of our presenters? I know it was a lot of information today, a lot of dates. Hopefully for most of you, that's not new information because you've all been meeting with our employer readiness team and having those meetings. So that shouldn't be new information and new dates for you all. But any questions about anything that anyone has spoken about today? And if you don't feel comfortable speaking up in front of the group, you can still use that advisory committee at calstrs.com email address. Even if we don't get to it in the next few minutes, we're happy to answer those questions after the meeting as well. As with all of our other employer advisory committee meetings, this will be posted on the website for you to refer back to if need be. I still don't see any hands raised, Megan, so I think everybody might be in the clear today.
It looks like it. Yeah, I don't see anything.
All right. Well, thank you all for attending. Our next slide shows you the next dates of our next few meetings. Thursday, August 7th. Please note the day change for that particular meeting. We are collaborating with CalPERS on that schedule change that week, so it will be a Thursday rather than a Wednesday. And then Wednesday, November 5th. So those are our next two EACs. That Thursday, August 7th will be the last one before we go live with Pension Solution. So it will be a good check-in point to make sure that you know everything you need to know and get the most up-to-date information. But again, we will maintain ongoing communication with all of you between now and then, of course. All right. And with that, thank you again for attending, and we will see you all next time.